Welcome to this week's episode of Rookie Roulette. I'm your host, Tyler Metcalf, and this week we have Kel'el Ware, rookie for the Miami Heat, 7 foot center out of the University of Indiana. His sophomore year, University of Oregon, as a freshman. Ware was a highly touted high school recruit, McDonald's All American, a lot of success with Team USA throughout high school. Really fascinating and polarizing prospect. Where ended up at 23 on the No Ceilings Collective Big Board. I had him a lot lower. I believe I was the lowest of the group on him, and I was always hesitant about how real the production was because it always felt like he was being put in the absolute best situation to succeed. And I didn't trust his decision making and intangibles and all of that kind of stuff. Not to say that he was a bad guy or anything like that. Um, but I always felt like the numbers misrepresented the film. And it was a really tough eval for me. And I look to be wrong. Ware's been having a really interesting rookie season for the Miami Heat. Stick around for my interview in a couple of minutes here with Wes Goldberg from Locked On Heat. Wes gives a ton of really good insight, and like me, he was not high on Ware coming into the draft, but he's done a complete 180 and provides a ton of insight. Before we get to that, though, I want to run just through some numbers here to kind of illuminate where is at so far this season. Um, so Ware was obviously the 15th pick to the Miami Heat, and like most draft picks, um, they go to the Miami Heat is like, oh, well, of course he went there. Now he's going to be good. Funny how that tends to work out. But when we look at synergy to kind of get a sense of what Ware's efficiency and play style has kind of looked like. As the pick and roll man, he's been in the 71st percentile in points per possession and the 91st percentile in frequency on cuts. He's in the 60th percentile in scoring and the 88th percentile in frequency. So, right off the bat, we can see that his responsibilities are minimal on the offensive end, but in a good way. And it's all him rim running, basically. Because on top of that, he's in the 81st percentile in at rim scoring, 82nd percentile in at rim shot frequency, and the 96th percentile in dunk frequency. So we're finally seeing Ware kind of get rid of the tough mid range jumpers and just simplify his offensive game, rim run, use that absurd catch radius to really provide some much needed vertical spacing to this Miami Heat offense. And again, what Wes dives into a lot of really good specifics and intel with that as well. But also, one of the big selling points and intrigue points with Ware was his shooting potential. Um, it's been okay, you know. I wouldn't call it his calling card or a huge weapon yet, but overall he's in the 49th percentile in spot up scoring and the 35th percentile on all jumpers, 32.9% from three. Um, on those jumpers, and he's only taken two jumpers off the dribble this season so far. So he's buying in to plain simple shooting off the catch, some pick and pop stuff, or rim running, and that's basically all his offense is right now, which is really fantastic. Um, when we go over to cleaning the glass to look at some of the kind of tendency rates with the defensive side and lineup data, there's some really encouraging numbers here. But as Wes kind of points at, they're also a little bit misleading. So overall, where it has a block rate of 2.5, which ranks in the 71st percentile, a steal rate of 1.3, which ranks in the 58th percentile, an offensive rebounding rate of 9.2, which ranks in the 61st percentile, and a defensive rebounding rate of 21.2, which ranks in the 76th percentile. When we look at his on off numbers, when he's on, the net rating is 1.5 higher with him on the court than when he's off the court. That differential ranks in the 58th percentile. Effective field goal rate of 56%, which ranks in the 77th percentile. Fantastic, because all of his when he's on the court, they're getting a ton of dunks. And that 56% effective field goal rate is 3.7% higher when he's on the court than off. That differential ranks in the 92nd percentile. So we're seeing already right off the bat that Ware is really helping the overall offensive efficiency because of the high efficiency looks that he's converting. The defensive rating is 114.1, which ranks in the 57th percentile. Opponents have an effective field goal rate of 53.3% when he's on, which ranks in the 68th percentile. But also, really, even more encouraging is that they have a free throw rate of just 14.4 when he's on the court, which ranks in the 98th percentile. So when he's on the court, his presence, his size, his length, his athleticism is helping the Heat contest shots, close out possessions on the boards, and also not foul. Really important stuff. But with rookies, it's important how they fit with the already established kind of cornerstones, and the two main ones are Bam Adebayo and Tyler Hero. When Ware plays with Bam, Miami has a defensive rating of 106.1, which ranks in the 96th percentile, but an offensive rating of just 110.1, which ranks in the 25th percentile. When Bam is off the court, the offensive rating jumps to 115.5, 63rd percentile, but the defensive rating also jumps to 117.9, 21st percentile. Huge difference. And again, kind of a real testament to how freakishly good Bam has been on the defensive end this year. With Hero on the court with Ware, the offensive rating is 116.4, 69th percentile. Really encouraging, especially since the Miami Heat don't really have a point guard. Wes shines a lot of light on that too, making a case for Tyler Hero at the end of the interview. But their defensive rating is 117, which ranks in the 28th percentile. Without Hero, the offensive rating plummets to 107.9, 16th percentile, and the defensive rating also plummets to 107.7, 92nd percentile. So we're kind of seeing a common theme here between Hero and Bam, and how Ware impacts both of those guys. But more importantly, with Bam and Hero on the court with Ware, Miami has an offensive rating of 111.5, just the 34th percentile, but a defensive rating of 107, 93rd percentile. So I just wanted to shed some light on some of the numbers and how Ware is impacting this team, how he's kind of getting his looks, how he's impacting the defense, what his defensive numbers look like, and then just how he fits with the mainstays and the cornerstones of this Miami Heat team. So let's jump over to my interview with Wes Goldberg. But real quick, we got to bring up the wheel, figure out who we're talking about next time. We're bring up the magical wheel here. We're spinning, and we are landing on a guy I've seen in person multiple times here. That'll be a really fun one. I'm really excited for that. So I promise to get another really intelligent guest on to make me look good, but more importantly, to inform you guys. I've really been enjoying the series. Unfortunately, I will be on vacation next week, so you're going to have to wait an extra week for the Dillingham episode, but it will be a good one. I promise it'll be worth the wait. But until then, let's jump over to my interview with Wes. Thrilled to welcome on this week's guest, Wes Goldberg from Locked On Heat. Wes, thank you for taking the time. How's it going?
It's going well. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And just before we dive into it, to everything, tell everyone where they can find all the awesome work covering the Heat and everything else covering the NBA that you do.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, Locked On Heat is the daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We got post game reactions. We've got everything that you need covering the team over there. And then I'm also the host of Real GM Radio. It's been around for a long time, hosted by Danny LaRue for a long time. He handed it off to me right before the season. So we've got that going. Just launched a YouTube channel over there, and I've got writing at various places, including The Ringer and Fansided and some other places like that. And so I'm all over the internet.
Wes does awesome work. Go follow him. Links and all that stuff will be in the description as well. But we're here to talk specifically about Miami Heat's rookie center from Indiana, Kel'el Ware. And just when Kel'el Ware got picked 15th overall to the Miami Heat. Just what was your initial reaction to the pick?
I hated it. I hated the pick, man.
How come?
I did a lot of work on this draft, and I do a little bit of work on almost every draft, and I was really interested in this last draft
Hmm.
because we all remember the storyline, the narrative around it was that there weren't any good players, and so I'm like, I was determined to find
There's got to be
a
one.
good player right in the middle of the first round, and you look at Khalil's bio data and his stats and all this, and you're like, wow, 7-footer, shoots a three a little bit, rebounds, blocks. This is an interesting player. And I went and looked at the film. And first, I read some stories first, and I'm like, all right, it didn't really work out in Oregon. I don't really like what I'm hearing out of that. He goes to Indiana and he starts playing there, but they don't really have any other options, so he kind of has to play. So I'm like, all right, what does that really mean? Then I go to the film, and I was expecting to see probably like a limited but effective rim roller, and I didn't see that at all. I saw a guy doing a bad LaMarcus Aldridge impression over and over and over again. A guy who fell in love with his back to the basket stuff, over dribbling, getting the ball poked away from him, trying to get like that again, that Aldridge like high release point kind of turnaround baseline jumper going, and it never really got going for him. And I'm like, this guy's doing all the wrong things. He has no idea that he's 7 feet tall, does not know how to use his body, sets lousy screens, chases blocks, leaves his feet all the time defensively. I don't want anything to do with this guy. And so on Locked On Heat, I put him we had the big board. I had him low. I almost had him off my board completely.
Yeah.
I was rooting for like a Zach Edey or something like that, or a Devin Carter, like one of these guys to fall. None of them fall. The Heat, and I'm looking at the board, I'm like, oh my God, the Heat are gonna take Kel'el Ware. And sure enough, they did, because they did work him out and all of that. And I hated the pick. I was really low on it. And then the first game of summer league, so Miami did the California Classic,
Yeah.
in the Bay Area, and the first game he's just doing the LaMarcus Aldridge stuff again. I'm just like, Jesus, like, did anybody talk to this guy? Turns out that they didn't before then, but the Heat coaches talked to him right after that first California Classic Summer League game, and they said, no more of this. You're not doing that. That's not your job as a rookie. A to B, north to south. That's your job. Set a high screen, get to the basket. Do not let your back see the basket. Like, don't let your back see the rim. And credit to Kel'el, man. He's like, okay, I'll just do that then. And then he did it, and then he was the best player in Las Vegas Summer League. He helped the Heat go to a Summer League championship, and he's basically been doing that for the most part since the regular season started as a rookie. Now, he didn't play a lot early in the season. The Heat were trying to kind of iron out some of the rawer stuff defensively with him. But he's started the last 15 games, and well, I'm sure there's more that we can get into there, but that was sort of my initial reaction. Was I hated it, but props to him. Like, he's kind of transformed as a player, and he's been exactly what I kind of expected to see that first time I turned the film on. So I know that was a long answer to your question, but it's been a long odyssey for me and Kel'el so
No,
far.
I love it because I'm in the exact same boat. Everyone's telling me it's like, oh man, he's just so big and he's athletic and there's like he's an obvious top 20 guy. I'm like, I don't see it. And it's like I see this guy who was constantly put in position to succeed at Indiana, where it's like, all right, we're gonna hold your hand and make sure that you're not a step out of place where you can even kind of be exposed. And he still found ways to get exposed consistently. And then, all these stories about work ethic and effort on the court, and you saw it pop up on film too. It's like, man, he's big. Like, what else is there? And then it's just the classic, oh, but man, if he ends up in Miami, they're going to figure it out, aren't they? They're going to get the best out of him. And then obviously he does. And it's like, okay, well, my ranking on him isn't looking so hot. So you kind of hinted at it, but from draft night to today, how is your kind of reaction and feeling to where both this season and just his fit long term? How has that changed?
Yeah, maybe there should just be a separate big board when we're doing this stuff of like, here's my big board if they're just drafted by a normal team. Here's my
Yes.
big board if they're drafted by Miami or Memphis or
Yeah.
these teams that like just do a really good job of developing young players. And the Heat, as we know, have had this great player development system that they've honed over basically since LeBron James left. They had been working on developing this player development system, and so it's been about 10 years that they've been working on this thing. And we know the stories of Duncan Robinson, Max Strus, Kel'el, like you name them, a bunch of success stories. All these guys were either second round picks or undrafted. Kel'el was to me the most interesting kind of ball of clay they've had because he's got elite athleticism and size. I mean, like top 1% athleticism and size and all of the potential in the world. But like we just said, wasn't putting any of it together in college. Like there wasn't a shred of evidence that he was going to be able to put this stuff together. They were drafting him just because he was basically a ball of clay. And they said, well, we made the most out of guys who played in D2 colleges and JUCOs and all these things. What can we do with a highly touted high school prospect who's 7 feet tall and can jump through the gym? And they're kind of proving it out, right? And you've got Malik Allen, who I think is one of the best big man coaches, big man assistant coaches in the NBA, hands on with Kel'el Ware in Miami right now. And that whole north to south thing that I was talking about before, it's pretty remarkable. And I think Ware gets so much credit for this. It's remarkable how quickly he just turned. He was like, "Yep, I'll just do this." And it almost makes me feel like one person ever had to just tell him to do it. But
Yeah.
or maybe it's just sort of the respect that he has for the Heat organization. He's like, "Well, if they're telling me to do it, I'll do it." And it was a long time before he was able to see consistent minutes on the court. But every time I talk to any teammates, any coaches, anybody within the Heat organization about how Kel'el was doing, I mean, they marvel. Like they were just like, this guy's a sponge, all the cliches, but I really like, sometimes they say it and then sometimes they say it and really mean it. I felt like they were really meaning it. Like my BS detector was not going off in those conversations. And so I'm like, all right, like I keep hearing it, but when are we going to see this guy? And 15 games ago, the Eric Spoelstra decides to make the decision. It was after a Denver Nuggets game where Jokic shreds them in the interior, and then the Spurs were coming up, and they made the decision at that point. Let's roll this thing out. Bam at power forward, Ware at center. Let's roll out the two big lineup that everybody's been asking for, and let's see how it does against Victor Wembanyama. It did really well. The Heat won the game, and they've stuck with it ever since. So my impression of Ware, now having been around him, seeing what the Heat coaching staff has been able to do, I've completely done a 180 on my impression of Ware in college, where I just couldn't stand him as a prospect. Now I'm really excited about what he can become as a 7-foot guy who can space the floor. We haven't talked about that part yet. Like can space the floor, block shots, runs to the rim. There was like a 2-week period where just throwing the lob to Ware was Miami's best form of offense, and because it's just so efficient. So it's a testament to their development staff. It's a testament to Ware. I think the sky's the limit for this guy now.
And you kind of touched on it there too, where it's like the intangibles and his willingness to accept this really simplified offensive role, where it's like, hey, just go. We're going to throw it up near the rim. Just go catch everything. And his catch radius is absurd, because he's so dang big and so athletic. But for a guy who is a former 5-star high school recruit, McDonald's All-American, he didn't have a ton of college success, but played at big time programs at Oregon and Indiana, a ton of Team USA accolades. It can be really tricky for those guys to be like, you know what? No, I am going to do a lot less than what I think I'm capable of doing. And it'd be really easy for him to just kind of be like, I'm a really good shooter. Give me the ball on the block. Let me shoot a little bit. Let me space the floor a little bit more aggressively. And being able to kind of just tailor back your role and responsibilities like that. And again, maybe it's just because he's in Miami with that staff and has that kind of respect for him. But I guess maybe other than that aspect of his season, what else has kind of really stood out to you and excuse me, and impressed you just with his season so far?
Well, the catch radius is ridiculous. I mean, it's Calvin Johnson. I don't know how else to explain it. It's Antonio Gates.
That was the exact comp I was thinking of, like the way when Calvin got drafted and they had him stand in front of the garage door. I was like, this feels eerily similar.
Right. And I went to Kel'el in the locker room a couple weeks ago, and I asked him, like, did you play football? And he was like, not really. No, like just a little bit growing up, but he stopped in middle school. And I was like, dude, you would have been an awesome tight end. He's like, I know I would have been, but he's like, but obviously basketball worked out for him. But The 3-point shooting I actually think has been really interesting with him because, like you mentioned, there could be a tendency for a young guy to be like, let me show what I could do. I could shoot, I could do it from the block, I could do it from mid range or whatever. And the fact that he's really bought into Miami's scheme here in terms of, in training camp, when the Heat were in training camp in the Bahamas, Eric Spoelstra during their scrimmages would say, 3-pointers are worth 3 points, shots at the rim are worth 3 points, mid range shots are worth 1 point. And everybody sort of bought into that for the most part. Like we could do a whole thing on Tyler Hero. It's been talked about enough, but like he's bought in. But it took years for Tyler Hero to buy in to not
Yeah.
shooting mid-range shots. Kel'el Ware is doing it right now, like right away. And obviously it's a little bit easier for a 7-footer who that stuff at the rim is just available for him. But even with his 3-point shooting, I haven't really hated any of the threes. Like you see this all the time with centers, like centers who have been in the league for 10 years who are like, well, I worked on my 3-point shot all summer and I want to show it off. And they just take like the dumbest 3-pointers
Yeah.
early in these games. Sometimes late in these games, you're like, why did you do that, dude? Like the pass to the guard was right there. Kalel's been really good about. I can maybe a 2 or 3 3-pointers all season long that I've been like, not my favorite decision in that moment, which for a rookie is pretty crazy. So I've been really impressed with his decision making and shot selection in general too. Other than that, I think mostly it's just the intangible stuff. I don't think anything on the court has really wowed me other than just the lob threat stuff and how additive that is to Miami and how that's just such a different. Eric Spoelstra likes to use the phrase all the time about, you want a menu of items to pick from on offense. And for the longest times, it felt like the Heat were working in a restaurant that was like really good at 2 menu items, but that was the whole menu. It was like, we do chicken parm, awesome, but that's about it. Uh, this Kel'el Ware thing is just a new thing that was not on the menu before, not even close. And that they added that has been pretty like crazy to see, and it really shows you how much they missed that when they didn't have it. So you add that, and then yeah, that's the thing that's really stood out, and just his character and his intangibles and getting to know him as a person a little bit more, and I've just been really impressed.
With the shooting, do you buy it as like a legitimate weapon, not just like an option for the offense, but like an actual weapon for the Heat going forward? Because and the percentage is like low or mid,
Yeah.
like low to mid 30s, nothing eye popping, but I think it's there long term at least. And like you said, with the shot selection, he's not forcing it. It's on like wide open spot up stuff or pick and pop stuff where the defense really goes after Hero. And now you have the 7-footer who instead of rolling into, maybe a well timed weak side rotation, he's just standing at the top of the key wide open. So do you think that maybe even as soon as next year that's like a big time weapon for them, and it's kind of a weapon that they haven't really had recently?
Mhm. Yeah, it's a great question. I think his release is a little bit slower than maybe you'd want it to be. That's something that they can work on, and the Heat have worked on with a lot of different players over the last few years. Is just kind of, streamlining the dip and getting that shot off and all that kind of stuff. But you're starting to see a little bit, and this is what I mostly pay attention to: is do defenses care when he has the ball out there? And it's been a mixed bag. It depends on the opponent. Some opponents obviously have it in the scouting report. Some opponents are either having it in the scouting report as an ignore or don't have it in the scouting report whatsoever, and teams are just not respecting them from beyond the arc, which tends to be when he does get those wide open threes and has those games where he's shooting 2 or 3 of them as opposed to maybe only one of them. So I do buy it because there's a willingness there, and usually
Hmm.
like the NBA could be pretty simple. Is like if that guy's willing to shoot it, we'll probably just close out.
Yeah.
It's really not that complicated. But I guess I'm curious to ask you because you're better at this stuff than I am. Like, what do you think about his shot? What did you think about it in college? Like the form, his 3-point stroke. Like, is it viable or is it just sort of like a willingness? Does he have touch? Like, what are you seeing from it?
um I was always a little more skeptical than others, and I think the initial reaction when you see a 7-footer with his kind of rim running capabilities just have the willingness to step out to three and launch a couple a game. It's like, oh, he's gonna shoot it. It's like, maybe, but odds are probably not. Um, but like, I don't think he has to be Brooke Lopez like
Hmm.
40% from three either. So like, I don't think he's going to be elite. I don't think he's going to be awful. If he can be in that 36 to 37% kind of career range, I think that gives them more than enough, especially on kind of easier opportunity, like high efficiency looks, whether it's from the corner when they're running a hero Bam high pick and roll, and Bam's able to kick it out to him on the short roll or have him crashing down from the corner, because just having that willingness, that league average type of percentile too, it creates opportunities for him to occasionally attack a closeout, or kind of back cut out of those kind of high pick and rolls where Bam and Hero are going to attract a ton of attention anyways. And now you have a backdoor lob to a freakish 7-footer because the weak side defender's worried about giving up that corner three too. So I don't think he's necessarily going to be prolific, because the release is a little funky, kind of sometimes goes like across his face from like left to right a little bit on it. The touch is okay, but it's never been anything that I've been overwhelmed with. The fact that he's really simplified the shot selection in general, though, like you kind of keep pointing out, that's huge. And that's an aspect of his game that I never really saw, going back to high school through his time at Indiana, where he was like, I'm the dude. I'm gonna get whatever I want. And now he's like, I'm just a dude and I will take what I can get.
Yeah. He's got this tattoo that I know you're aware of. It just says "Humble Beast" on his shoulder. And I look at it all the time. I was like, oh, how humble are you if you tattoo humble on your body?
And
But
and
he
refer to
is,
yourself as a beast.
and then refer to yourself as a beast. So, but there is something to it, right? Where it's also like a game of poker, right? Where he's kind of been taught, you know what? You don't have to shoot it every time you're holding a queen and a 7. That's going to be a tough pull. But if you've got pocket aces, shoot it. And that's sort of what he's learned to do is, all right, I've got pocket aces. In other words, I'm wide open. I'm in the corner, efficient look, in rhythm, trailing 3-pointer, one bounce, step into it. That's when he's shooting it. And I think the shot selection's been good.
And those are the types of looks I love him taking.
Right.
It's the DHO keeper step back threes where it's like, let's get rid of those forever, hopefully. But again, that all of that circles back to the intangibles and him buying in on the scouting reports and coaching directives and all that kind of stuff. So, and I guess kind of on the flip side of the optimism, what has kind of concerned you the most about his game so far?
It's still a major work in progress defensively. I think for somebody with his size and athleticism, he should be averaging a lot more blocks. Like there should be multiple 3 or 4 blocks per game. And I know defense isn't just blocks, but that's sort of his job, and it's just the production defensively hasn't been there. The rebounding comes and goes, and it feels like those conversations that we were talking about in terms of, hey, don't do this stuff, be a rim roller, buy into this role offensively. It kind of feels like behind the scenes, those are the conversations happening right now in terms of rebounding. Hey, you had 2 rebounds the other night. That's not going to fly. You need to be on the boards. Next game he goes out, has 9, 10, 11 rebounds, whatever it is. And then he kind of retreats back to not being as physical as maybe you'd want him to be on the glass. So that comes and goes there too. The defensive stats with him are really bad. Like they're really bad. He's basically only viable as a defensive player when Bam is on the floor with him. Otherwise, it doesn't really work. When with Ware and Bam on the court together, it's fine defensively. When it's and so the Heat are doing this thing where they start with Bam and Ware, and then they go immediately into like a Jared Allen, Evan Mobley stagger type rotation, where it goes Bam and Ware together, then either Bam or Ware comes off, the other one just slides to the center spot, and then now you're just staggering. You got 48 minutes of either Bam or Ware at center, and that's essentially what they're going to do. And they're going to open halves and close halves with both of them on the court at the same time. The minutes when Ware is on the court by himself without Bam, the Heat are posting a defensive rating of like 117 something. It would rank in the bottom 5 in the league.
It's like 11 points higher than when Ware is with Bam.
Right. It's wild. Like Bam is why Ware is able to be on the court right now. And that's tough, right? And so, and you see it, right? Like I don't even need the advanced, like you see it on the court and you're just like, yep, he's kind of in the wrong spot. He feels like he's a half step to a step just away or behind the play a lot in pick and roll coverages. And he's not always chasing the blocks when you want him to chase them. And then he is chasing the blocks when you don't want him to chase them. And that's the part that I'm still waiting to come around. But at the same time, like center is a really tough job to
Hmm.
learn in the NBA. Like it might have the steepest learning curve defensively in
Yeah.
the league for a rookie, depending on whatever by position. And the fact that he's at least getting on the court now, I think is a good sign. You're hoping to see over these next 20 plus games some real progress on that end because it feels like he's kind of plateaued over the last month or so. Month might be strong over the last couple of weeks, and you're hoping to see maybe something further.
So I'm to kind of keep going with the defensive stuff,
Yeah.
because like I when you look on cleaning the glass and stuff and the block rate and steal rate, they look decent, but again, since the role was so kind of minimal earlier in the season and you kind of touched on the inconsistencies, do you think that he's kind of inflated some of those with like big performances and then just the consistency on that end of just doing the little things night in and night out just hasn't been there? Has that kind of been the biggest issue?
Yeah, I mean, it's just the Kel'el Ware experience is a roller coaster, right? Like there are games where he does have, I think he's got like a 4 block game, a 5 block. There's games in there, and I think the other part of this too is, he was out of the rotation essentially to start the season, and then he got some minutes with some reserve groups, and then in fourth quarters of blowouts, one way or the other, and he kind of padded his stats in those blowout games earlier in the year. But one of the things I was interested to see, and I was actually looking this up this morning, was well, what's it looked like since he's been a starter? You would imagine, okay, well, you're in the starting lineup. There must be progress. Like these rim protection stats, right? These must be better
Hmm.
since entering the starting lineup, and they're not. They're worse. They're almost twice as bad. Like he's opponents are averaging well above their usual averages when Ware is the closest defender in the paint, and so maybe and that might just be a function of well now instead of going up against like victory cigar players, now he's going up against starting players,
Sure.
and that's probably honestly what it is. I try not to be too hard on him, but yeah, it's just it's the little things are not there. But again, I'll go back to what I said before. You talk to the people in the organization, and they are very confident that that stuff is going to get there. And I think they're doing the right thing by letting him play through the mistakes
Hmm.
because he needs the film. He needs the film to go back. He needs to be able to see the pictures. That's everything for a rookie big man. I mean, that's all of it. And so, more experience, I think he'll be better. I'm just really looking forward to seeing that progress start to materialize on the court a little bit more and for him to be more consistent.
Yeah, and the easiest way is to just play and learn
Hmm.
and figure out, get it on tape, like you said, and figure out what you're doing. Because I like you kind of touched on it with like his drop coverage and stuff, and then like in this most recent game against the Bucks, I mean, he got caught just like flat footed and square, and Damian Lillard, who's quick, awesome scorer, all that kind of stuff. He's also old and small, and just like blew past him multiple times because Ware's stance and angles and what he was giving up just is not acceptable for
Hmm.
a primary kind of rim protector. Um, you also kind of touched on it with the pairing with Bam. The numbers with Bam have been good, especially on defense, but without Bam, different story. And 106.1 defensive rating when Ware and Bam are on the court. Offense is a little more of a struggle, but
Hmm.
how has that kind of pairing, that Twin Towers pairing, looked to you, and what do you think the long-term viability of it is? Because we kind of saw experimentation a little bit with it in the Olympics with Bam and Anthony Davis. Obviously, Anthony Davis is a different player than Kel'el Ware, but we kind of got that framework ahead of time. And just what was been your impression of that big man pairing?
Yeah, this is more of a Bam story than it
Yeah.
is a Ware story, right? And so I think about Bam brings up the Olympics all the time. The fact that he was able to play next to Anthony Davis and play power forward. It reminds me of like when you listen to a podcast and you've got like a young director or a director on the podcast, and the interviewer will be like, "Well, what made you want to start making movies?" And they'll just like name a movie from when they were like 6 years old, and ever since I saw Star Wars, I just wanted to be a filmmaker. That's sort of how Bam talks about the Olympics. He's like, ever since I played power forward next to Anthony Davis, that's all I wanted to do with my life is play power forward next to a 7 footer. Um, and Kel'el Ware is that, right? Kel'el Ware
Mhm.
is that for Bam Adebayo. And so I think the front office and the coaching staff decided, all right, Jimmy Butler is either not going to be a part of this organization, and obviously they've traded him. And ever since they kind of came to the realization that Jimmy Butler is not going to be a part of the organization one way or the other, they decided, all right, we got to go all in on Bam and do whatever we can to make him comfortable and maximize his skill set, because Bam also really struggled offensively to start the year.
Yeah.
And so, you put Ware at center, and that maximizes Bam. That means that Bam doesn't have to shoot over Brook Lopez. He could shoot over Bobby Portis instead. It's a very different kind of assignment, right? And so you've got that, and then defensively, you're unlocking Bam's switchability, where over the last couple of years, because of Miami's limitations defensively, in terms of a personnel standpoint, they had to play classic drop coverage with Bam. He's not a drop defender, but he made it work anyway because he's, I think pound for pound the best defender in the league. So this is essentially, it's a Bam story, and I think it's working because now Bam is playing a lot better offensively. Defensively, it's just been different. He looks refreshed and re-energized. And for a kind of a season that feels like it's kind of lost here, this is a season in terms of, contending in playoffs and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. This to me is a season of discovering for the Heat. And I think what they've landed on is, whether it's Ware or somebody else long term, whatever it is, Bam has to be a power forward for us if he's going to be our superstar. And that's mostly what it is. So, I think it's worked. I think it's worked on both ends. I mean, you just read off the defensive numbers. I think offensively, with Bam being empowered on that end, that's obviously helped. If they can unlock the Ware lob a little bit more, you saw the Hawks pretty much scout that. The Heat tried to get Ware on the lob on 2 possessions in the opening couple minutes, and the Hawks were so dialed in there. And the Hawks, by the way, not a good defense, and they were even dialed in enough to just kind of swat that away. So they got to unlock the different looks and figure out when they can get to those lobs, and Ware's got to get better at setting those screens offensively and stuff like that. But moral of the story is, I think it has worked, and it's what the Heat have to do, and it's what they plan to do going forward.
And then I guess kind of along that same framework, just how has the Hero and Kel'el Ware pairing looked to you?
Okay, right? Tyler Hero's not a natural point guard and shouldn't be your sort of lead ball handler, but he's been that for Miami all season. Yeah. And the fact that he's got games that he's got 11 assists here and 9 assists there is pretty remarkable. I remember interviewing John Calipari a couple years ago about Tyler Hero in college, and Calipari said he told me that he once told Tyler Hero, don't pass the ball anymore. Just bad stuff happens when you pass the ball in Kentucky. Just shoot it. When you get it, you're a play finisher. Just shoot it. So the fact that he went from a guy who coached to stop passing the ball to a guy who can average 4 or 5 assists wherever he's at now is a pretty remarkable leap for a guy who was just throwing interceptions all the time. So it's sort of, you could see Tyler Hero trying to fit into a role that he isn't meant to play. And the Heat, they added Davion Mitchell, awesome defender. Still a lot to learn offensively. We'll put it that way with Mitchell, and not a natural table setter either. And so I think the Heat are just sort of missing that guy to unlock Ware. I think that's another big part of this too. It's not all on the rookie center. They don't really have a natural point guard who's really good at running pick and roll, and you kind of see that play out a lot on the floor. They have a really hard time with just basic entry passes sometimes. Their best entry pass guy is Bam, who ironically is the guy who needs the entry pass, right? And so right. It's pretty tough. And so some of their best passing sequences have actually been high lows with Bam and Ware, or Nikola Jovic before he got hurt and Ware, or Jovic and Bam. Their big men are their best passers only because, first of all, they don't have great passers on the team. Jimmy Butler's not there anymore, and he was a great passer. But just because they're so tall that they can at least see over the defense, and they just kind of struggle with that from every other position. So another long answer for you, but the Hero Ware, it's fine. I would just to me, they're both play finishers more than they're play starters. And if you just had a guy in the middle of that action to start the play and set the table for them, I think you could see both of those guys kind of take another leap.
Makes sense. Then just to kind of wrap up with Ware specifically, just what are your kind of expectations with him going forward, both for just, the next 2 months of this season and then next, throughout his rookie contract?
Yeah, like I said, it's a season of discovery. Play him, let him get the film, let him learn. This summer is going to be really big for Ware. I expect he might see a couple of summer league games, and probably that's about it. Just to be around the coaching staff, the Heat do a really good job of keeping guys in the building. You know what I mean? So they'll be working with him very closely, and I'd expect a pretty big leap for him in his sophomore season. I think that's probably the next logical step here. So yeah, it's just let him play through his mistakes. Don't let the expectations get too high. This is not like a Jaime Jaquez Jr., 24 years old as a rookie. Like we're kind of hoping to see the finished product already.
Hmm.
We're a few years away from the Kel'el Ware finished product, and the fact that he's on the court, providing an impact, and like I said, most importantly, making Bam's life easier. Those are so many. That's checking so many boxes right away that you probably didn't anticipate checking. That you got to feel pretty good about it if you're the Heat.
And then just to kind of wrap up in general, what's something with this team as a whole? It can be Ware again, or Bam, or Hero, or the one of the assistant coaches, whatever, that you found either undercovered, just fascinating, bizarre, weird, exciting, anything.
Yeah, I think maybe the story of the season is just Tyler Hero. I think he's got a real claim to be most improved player. And usually when you look at most improved player, you see some sort of physical leap or physical change or statistical change or something like that. And with him, it's been a mindset change. And I've always been really impressed with Tyler just being around him about how straightforward he is, especially within an organization that kind of prides itself on not being straightforward and kind of mysterious and giving like mysterious quotes and never really saying anything. Tyler's like the opposite of that. He's like, he'll tell you exactly how he feels. He'll be like, yep, I was in trade rumors. The Heat tried to trade me. No big deal. I'll just keep playing. I'll show you guys. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And that was obviously a couple summers ago. But going into this season, he basically eschewed all that previous talk of, I want to be an all-star. I want to be one of the best scorers in the league. And all these things that he said that was very sort of braggadocio kind of stuff, which I didn't have a problem with because every young player, you gotta have some sort of
Right.
inner level of that. But he just didn't say any of that. Media day, he was like, I'm going to do whatever the team needs me to do. They want me to come off the bench, I'll do that too. And it's like, whoa, this guy always said he was a starter and always kind of publicly pushed back against coming off the bench. So you noticed it right away on media day, and then he takes the court and he's like, no more mid-range jumpers. All threes, all to the basket. And again, going back to how open he is, like you don't hear this a lot from players. Tyler Hero is just like, I looked at Steph Curry's shot chart and I just wanted to do that. And I'm just trying to recreate Steph Curry's shot chart. You don't really hear players try to compare themselves to other players,
Right.
as you know. Like especially you ask like a prospect, who do you view your game as? Oh, I'm one of one. I'm my own guy. It's like, all right, cool. But for Tyler to just come out and be like, yeah, and he still will look at Steph Curry's shot charts. And if he has a bad game, he'll go look at Steph's game and be like, how did he play? Where's his shot chart out? Okay, and he almost uses that as inspiration. It's a kind of fascinating version of bulletin board material
Hmm.
for Hero. And I don't think that part of it has been talked about enough, especially as we kind of have 20 plus games left here as we get into award talk and all that kind of stuff. I think he should have a real claim at most improved because sometimes even more like than that a physical change in a guy that enters the league when he's 18 to when he's 24, and then all of a sudden you see that physical change and now he's winning most improved. That's stuff that you expect as these kind of
Right.
young men grow into their bodies. But for a guy who high school, college, NBA, sixth man of the year, two finals teams, played the same way all the time, for him to suddenly just be like, I'm going to switch it after an off year, you just don't really see that for guys in their sixth season in the NBA who've had as much on their resume and as much success as Tyler Hero has. So that's my vote for most improved player of the year. So I took your question and I used it as an opportunity to lobby for Tyler Hero.
No, I love it. We'll clip it, send it around to everyone,
There we
and
go.
make sure get their votes. No, that's fascinating, and that's kind of something that I've always leaned heavily on when it comes to like the most improved player stuff. It's like I don't care about a guy making the leap from his second to third year like we all expected him to. Like he was a top 5 pick, whoop de doo. But when they actually change their role or really adapt something about their game, that's really hard. Like you said,
Mm-hmm.
especially when it's a almost an entirely different position or with a team that's going through a lot of turnover or chaotic stuff going on or
And to
both.
stick with it, right? Like you hear all the time players like, I want to push the pace or I'm going to do this. And then you see it for 2 weeks and then they just go back to what they were.
Yeah.
Right. And he's really he's stuck with it. And by the way, should mention also, then made the All-Star team for the first time in his
Right.
career. So he did all these things and literally did improve the efficiency, the numbers, everything is off the charts. Everything's at a career high. So he really figured it out.
Wes, this was awesome. Thank you again so much for your time. Just one more time, tell everyone how they can support you.
Yeah, go check out Locked On Heat. It's wherever you get your podcasts on YouTube. Also, Real GM Radio. We're doing those episodes once a week with some great guests. You can find that on YouTube. Please subscribe on YouTube. We just joined we just launched our YouTube page over there, so we're just getting that off the ground. And plus, you can find that wherever you get your podcasts.
Wes does awesome work. Go support him. Wes, thank you.
Thank you.